Hello and welcome to this episode of Study Sessions. This episode is in fact part of a new series that I'm calling See the World in a Grain of Sand. And this is going to be a set of episodes where we'll take a single quotation from one of our GCSE set texts and then use that quotation as a lens through which to view the entire text, whether it's a novel, play, or poem. Now, the aim is to focus our attention on how important individual quotations are, and also to show how we can take these key moments, if we think carefully, if we examine them properly, and really see how they can reveal a writer's view of character, society, human nature. Now, the idea behind the title is simple. It's a quotation from a William Blake poem. Just as a grain of sand can reflect an entire landscape, single key quotations, carefully selected, can in essence contain the ideas of the whole text if we learn how to look closely enough. So, in this first episode in this series, we're going to start with Lord of the Flies and a line spoken by Piggy, a character often understood allegorically and symbolically as a voice of reason, intelligence, and indeed civilization itself. Piggy says, "Life," here's a quote, "life," said Piggy expansively, "is scientific. That's what it is. In a year or two, when the war's over, they'll be travelling to Mars and back." Now, at first glance, this sounds very optimistic. It sounds intelligent. It sounds sensible, all the things that we associate with Piggy. Piggy is imagining a future that has been shaped by, or will be shaped by, knowledge, progress, and human achievement. But by the end of today's episode, I want to show you that this quotation can also help us understand and maybe reframe one of the most disturbing moments in the novel. Piggy's refusal to accept responsibility for Simon's death, and indeed his later claim within that Simon asked for it. To understand why Piggy says this and why it matters, we need to begin with what this quotation reveals about what Piggy believes about the world. So when Piggy says, and obviously Golding is constructing Piggy as a character, to say that life is scientific, Piggy's not just talking about experiments or scientific technology. Piggy here is expressing, very concisely, his worldview. Piggy believes that the world is governed by reason, logic, that problems can be solved logically, and indeed that progress is somehow inevitable or always going to happen. So in Piggy's mind, it seems that civilization moves forward. Wars end, adults intervene, science advances, and ultimately order is restored. And that adverb, expansively, we'd want to zoom in on that because it's really important. Piggy here is speaking, and he doesn't do this very often in the book. Piggy here, though, is speaking with confidence and certainty. He's imagining a future where humanity escapes its limits and, in fact, actually travels to Mars. Now, this is suggestive of a sort of boundless, limitless faith in human progress and, crucially, a belief that intelligence somehow naturally is going to lead to moral improvement. Piggy seems to be believing that as people become more knowledgeable, they become better people. Now, we need to take a moment to consider who's writing this book. William Golding, we know, served in the Royal Navy during the Second World War. William Golding witnessed firsthand modern industrialized violence, the brutality of the Second World War. He saw, personally, how scientific advancement didn't prevent cruelty, it instead enabled it on a larger scale. So when Piggy confidently declares, "Oh, when the war's over," Golding is being deeply ironic. Because the novel, Lord of the Flies, doesn't present war as some temporary interruption to civilization. It presents war as something civilization actually produces. And the dead parachutist on the top of the mountain, which is mistaken by the boys as the beast, the dead parachutist is a constant reminder of war. Even on a remote, seemingly untouched island, the violence of the adult world is present. The war doesn't remain somehow outside the novel, off the island. It follows the boys and it hangs over them. So Piggy's optimism is therefore quietly being undermined by Golding from the very beginning. But Piggy doesn't notice this, or perhaps he can't afford to notice it. Because Piggy doesn't just believe in rationality, he actually depends upon it. Rationality, logical, careful thought and reason, isn't just simply how Piggy understands the world. In a way, it's how he protects himself from the world. If everything can be explained logically, then nothing truly terrible needs to be confronted emotionally. If events have causes, then guilt can be avoided. And I think this becomes really crucial when we examine Simon's death. Simon, remember, is killed, murdered, during a storm. The setting matters. It's dark, there's thunder and lightning, the boys are chanting and dancing. They're, of course, afraid of the beast. Golding describes them losing their individual identities and becoming this single violent group or creature. He writes, of course, that there were no words, no movements, but the tearing of teeth and claws. So language has disappeared, no words. Reason has disappeared. They've stopped thinking as individual, rational human beings. This isn't scientific behavior. It is instinctive, it's animalistic, it's emotional, and it's really, really irrational. And Piggy's there. Piggy is deeply involved. And so the next day, Piggy refuses, unlike Ralph, to accept responsibility. He says the killing of Simon was an accident. And that word is doing a great deal of work. By calling Simon's death an accident, Piggy removes intention. He removes agency. An accident is something that simply happens. Didn't mean to do this. It was an accident. An accident has no moral weight. For an accident, no one's really truly to blame. Piggy is trying to force what happened with Simon into a rational framework. Accidents can be explained without moral judgment. But Piggy goes further. He then says that Simon asked for it. Now, this is so unsettling, particularly, I think, coming from a character associated in our minds with intelligence and reason. But it is completely, I'm arguing, consistent with Piggy's worldview. By saying Simon asked for it, Piggy suggests that Simon's actions caused his own death. So the responsibility is shifted away from the group and, horribly, onto the victim. Simon, in this framing by Piggy, becomes reckless, foolish, and sort of intrusive. Piggy implies that by coming out of the darkness, Simon provoked what happened to him. Now, this isn't reason, but it is rationalization. Piggy cannot accept that ordinary human beings, and this includes himself, are capable of such extreme violence without justification. That truth, if he accepted it, would shatter his belief that life ultimately is scientific. It's orderly, predictable, governed by logic. So instead, what does Piggy do? He creates an explanation, he makes one up that preserves his way of seeing the world. If Simon asked for it, the boys aren't guilty. If Simon asked for it, the violence that they inflicted on Simon makes sense. If Simon asked for it, then the world still operates according to a set of seemingly logical rules. What makes this especially tragic is that, of course, Simon is the only character who truly understands the beast. He recognizes that the beast is not something external, but something inside human beings. Simon is killed for bringing truth, and Piggy's response shows how rational language can be used not to confront violence, but to actually excuse it. When we return then to Piggy's earlier claim that, quote, life is scientific, the connection becomes really clear. Piggy believes that everything must have a cause and an explanation. Calling Simon's death an accident removes intention. Saying Simon asked for it removes guilt. And so together, these ideas allow Piggy to preserve his belief that civilization works and that human beings are not fundamentally violent. Golding is not presenting, then, Piggy as cruel. Piggy, of course, is frightened. He's frightened of what Simon's death reveals about human nature. Admitting guilt, his responsibility in what happened to Simon, would mean admitting that for him and the others, reason failed, the rules failed, and that progress is not guaranteed. Piggy's death later in the novel, in a sense, completes this idea. When Piggy dies, the conch is shattered. That symbol of rational discussion and order is destroyed. Piggy's body is described twitching, quote, like a pig's after it has been killed. It's a really brutal and horrific image. The boy who believed most strongly, most resolutely in logic and civilization is reduced to an animal body. The, in a sense, bag of fat that Roger perceives him to be. Science does not save Piggy. Words don't save him. Rules don't save him. And so we could argue then that Piggy never really fully accepts the truth before he dies. So when he says that life is scientific, Golding is doing something very precise. He's presenting a worldview that appears sensible, optimistic, and modern, but which collapses when confronted with the grim reality of human behavior and our capacity for evil. Golding isn't arguing against science, though. What he is doing is warning that intelligence without moral self-awareness, and in fact, a really clear-eyed understanding of what human beings are capable of, without that, intelligence can actually be dangerous because rational language can sanitize, seek to clean up and excuse away brutality. Civilization can excuse its own violence if it refuses to look honestly at itself and honestly at human beings. So Piggy's tragedy is that he believes reason will save humanity, and yet he uses reason to deny humanity's darkest impulses. Seen through this single quotation, we can understand Piggy's denial of guilt, his claim that Simon, quote, asked for it, and of course, coming back to the novel's William Golding's wider warning about human nature. All in one line. And through it, we can see the whole text. So as always, thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this an engaging and interesting episode that's illuminated what I think is one of the most important quotations in the whole text. See you on the next one.